Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, we have breaking news. A New York appeals court has thrown out a $500 million fine in a civil fraud case against President Trump.
Donald Trump just scored one of the biggest legal turnarounds in recent memory. A New York appeals court erased the massive $500 million civil fraud judgment against him, slashing the penalty from more than $500 million to zero. Trump is calling it total vindication. But here's the twist. The court didn't clear him of fraud. Let's look at what's going on. The case started with New York Attorney General Letitia James accusing Donald Trump and his company of inflating the value of their assets to secure loans and insurance benefits. The claim was simple. Trump wasn't as rich on paper as he said he was, but those inflated numbers gave him better financial deals than he should have received. Earlier this year, Judge Arthur Engoron issued a stinging ruling after a lengthy civil trial. He said the Trump organization had engaged in persistent fraud, and he didn't mince words. The penalty? A staggering $454 million judgment, which, with interest, ballooned to over $500 million. That number grabbed headlines, not just because of its size, but because of what it meant in practice. Trump and his lawyers worked to secure bonds to cover the amount while an appeal played out at the same time. Engoron imposed serious restrictions on Trump's business life. Trump himself was banned from serving as a corporate officer or director of any New York company for 3 years. His sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, faced similar penalties. A court-appointed monitor was also put in place to oversee the Trump organization's financial dealings. The appeals court ruling on August 21st, 2025, the New York Appellate Division issued a ruling that completely changed the picture. By a divided vote, the judges threw out the massive financial penalty. The majority said the $454 million judgment, which had grown past $500 million with interest, violated the Eighth Amendment's ban on excessive fines. That clause, usually associated with criminal punishment, was applied here to a civil fraud case, something that rarely happens. The court emphasized proportionality. While the court agreed that fraud occurred, the sheer size of the fine compared to the alleged harm was out of scale. The judges reasoned that financial penalties cannot be designed to crush a defendant, even in high-profile cases. One judge went further, suggesting the lawsuit should have been dismissed altogether. Although there is relief from the money judgment, the bans preventing Trump from serving as a corporate officer in New York are still in effect. The same goes for the restrictions placed on his sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, and the continuing oversight of the Trump organization by a court-appointed monitor. What this means for Trump. For Donald Trump, the appeals court ruling is a massive financial relief. He no longer faces the nightmare of coming up with $500 million in cash or bonds. That alone gives him breathing room at a time when his legal expenses and political campaign costs are soaring. But the picture isn't spotless. The fraud finding remains, and the sanctions continue to block him from leading companies in New York for the next 3 years. And that means practical limits on how he manages his business empire. It also leaves a legal scar that critics can point to, regardless of the erased fine. Segment 4, political and legal fallout. The appeals ruling didn't end the fight. New York Attorney General Letitia James has already vowed to take the case up to the state's highest court, the Court of Appeals. That means the erased fine could still come back in some form, depending on how the top judges view the Eighth Amendment issue. For Trump, it creates uncertainty. Today, he owes nothing. Tomorrow, the bill could return. Politically, the ruling feeds two narratives at once. Trump frames it as proof that the system is stacked against him, yet ultimately fails to hold up under scrutiny. His opponents point out that fraud was confirmed and that sanctions against him and his sons remain. Beyond Trump, the case highlights how courts may be more willing to apply constitutional protections, like the excessive fines clause, to business penalties. That could ripple far beyond this case, shaping how future corporate fraud trials are handled. And this case isn't just about Donald Trump. It's about the balance between punishing misconduct and respecting constitutional limits. The appeals court used the Eighth Amendment's ban on excessive fines in a way rarely seen in civil business fraud cases. That sends a message. Even when the defendant is famous, wealthy, and controversial, penalties must still be proportionate to the actual harm. For future cases, this ruling could become a touchstone. Regulators and attorneys general may think twice before stacking huge fines designed to make headlines, knowing that appellate courts might strike them down. At the same time, the decision leaves intact a clear fraud finding and serious restrictions on Trump's ability to operate in New York. In that sense, It draws a hard line between financial punishment and reputational accountability. So the $500 million penalty is gone, but the stain of fraud remains. And with an appeal to New York's highest court still looming, the story isn't over. Thanks for joining us today. Due Process Daily. Throw us a like and consider subscribing to the channel to help us grow.